what is this? Some of you might have found this in a box with an antique sock machine. So what is this for? Well, this is what this video is to show you. It's for casting and getting your knitting started. What's down in here is one of the metal baskets that often comes with antique machines. And this is a sample of what it should look like if you do it right, if you use that tool to get your knitting started. And this is assuming that you've come up with an antique machine that has this little basket thing in it, and you're looking at it wondering, what in the world am I going to do with that? Well, you're going to get your knitting started. It has a hook to put a weight on the bottom, and weight meaning one of these. Now this is a new one from the Erlbachers, goes with my Speedster. But any of the metal weights would be what this hook is designed to hold. There's a disc, and the disc has holes and is an anchor for different wires. And all of these different little wires in here are all kind of independent. They certainly function independently up at the top. But they're all connected. They're one continuous strand of wire down underneath on the disc. And then there's a screw, and this will often come loose, and you'll need to reposition it and tighten it up. Make it tight so that it doesn't come out right in the middle of you're trying to cast on. Okay, so you're going to reach down from underneath your cylinder and push it up toward, not the top, just about halfway, just so that the tops of these little tine things, that they're where you can easily reach them and wrap the yarn around one tine and then back around a needle, then back around. With weight on the bottom, you have this little metal cast-on basket. So our goal is going to be what you see here, and that's why I'm showing it to you, so you'll know what our goal is. And that's knitting that gets started by being attached to these little tines. And we'll zoom in on that so you can see it better. You find these baskets in many of your antique machines. Laguerres, auto knitters, so Gerhardts. They come in slightly our cylinder, and we've got our cast-on tool right here. And it doesn't matter whether or not this came with a particular machine. I'm testing this out on the Erlbacher Speedster, which doesn't come with one. It doesn't need to, because the Erlbachers include a cast-on bonnet with all of their machines. Cylinders. This particular one is a 64. Now, in the directions, the original ones prior to around 1920 said you should do it just like this with all the needles in. Then after 1924, it all changed. In all of the different manuals that I looked at, whether it was Laguerre or Master Machine, Auto Knitter, and the English machines, the Imperias, the Victorias, Symbols, they're all very, very similar machines. They all recommended that you start with every other needle. And so we're going to take out every other needle. An example where the older manuals probably are going to give you advice that may lead to failure. There are a lot of opportunities in there for some failure at this, and if you can't even get your knitting started without a great amount of frustration, the chances of your turning this wonderful little machine into your favorite hobby are minimal. So let's make it as simple as possible. Let's use every other needle instead of every one. And then instead of coming in from underneath, take it with your right hand and hold on to the tines just as you saw there. It'll spread out and you need to kind of grasp it and pull them in so that you can set it. Our knitting started. We're going to start up here and we're going to thread the topper. And this is the topper, and this is a little platform. Actually, it's an iPhone carry protector thing that we've taken some parts off of, but anchored it underneath here so I can set my phone, and that's what allows me to shoot right down in the center of the cylinder and take pictures or videos. Okay, so we're interested in this part right at the moment. So we're going to run our yarn in the back in one of the back holes, bring it through and in the hook right here, bring it around and in front and in the slot that's in this mechanism right here, and then come back to the front and lift up, set it in the break, and then pull it down into the front hole. It's all easy thread. You don't have to cut your thread to put yarn in or take yarn out. It's very, very thoughtful. The only other machine that I know of that did this was the Tuttle. It has that, and I really appreciate that, both about the Tuttle and the Erlbacher Speedster. And okay, so that's how you thread it, and we're going to take and pull out from our yarn, which is on a cone. We're going to take and pull out about 1.5 yards. We have our tool and we have our cylinder ready to go with every other needle in it. So I'm going to take the tool and hold it so that I can put it down this way inside the cylinder and hold on to it with the left hand. If you happen to have an easy feed yarn guide, it isn't essential that you keep it in your yarn guide. If you don't have an easy feed, you don't have a choice. You have to have it in there. Okay, so I'm going to avoid being in this area where the needles don't rise up. I'll just move it just enough to come over here and hook on to that one. And then I will do the same thing with the tine. I'll hook onto a tine and I'll wrap the next needle and hook onto a tine and wrap the next needle and the next needle. And the reason you do this is because in most cases there isn't a little tine or hook to anchor to for every needle. So generally speaking, you may, rather than have multiple threads around these little hooks, which can get very confusing and very messy, just put one and wrap a needle and around a hook and wrap a needle and around a hook and wrap a needle, and then you can move over a little bit because you're likely to have more of these tines than you actually are going to need. So wrap around, get a hook, wrap around, and when you practice this just a little bit, and if you're younger than my 68 years, you've got the opportunity to be a little more have more dexterity. But this is all it takes. It's just this wrapping around. And I think doing it with every other needle is going to be much simpler than trying to have every needle in your cylinder, no matter what size of cylinder you've got or how many slots it has. Now, assuming that I'm talking mostly to rank beginners, this is the easiest way. There are directions that suggest that you should do a backward loop, like wrap it around, going like this, you know, like wrap. See how probably, but that gets so tight around your needle that it makes it very hard to knit off. And if it's wool and not a very strong crochet cotton, it's likely to break. I think wrapping one time in one, you know, in just around once, not an E-wrap, makes it easier to do. It's more accessible. Okay, so now we're going to advance it just a little bit so that we can get the needles up, right? So if you pull down on it, just tug on it. You can kind of see how I'm moving it from underneath, right? So you just tug on it a little bit. And knit those off. See how those knitted off? Enough to get these needles up. So then we'll keep going around. And of course the last one's always going to be the hardest, right? Okay. A little more than what we needed. So now you take your weight and you set it in that hook underneath. You see it pull down? Okay, so now it's ready to go. And okay, so we've got every other needle being knit. And now we put our other needles back in. Making sure your latches, and that's, see if I can show you that. See the little latch right here? You want to make sure those are open, because if they're not, your latches open, you will see people in the videos, myself and others, always going around and feeling and making sure that our latches are open. Otherwise, you drop stitches. Sometimes you can drop everything, goes crashing to the floor. And the reason for that, when you just say, well, it was just one latch. Well, if it doesn't get in there and it stays in that yarn, quits being in the place that it needs to be for the next needle to pick up, then none of the needles ahead of that drop stitch will pick up on the yarn. So it's so quick to crank. It's also very quick to drop everything to the floor. It takes less than a second. Okay, that's how you get your knitting started, using the little basket that comes with the antique machines.